I don't know about you, but it feels like more and more organizations and companies are shifting their virtual engagements to in person. So I wanted to ask our loyal podcast listeners, do you know of an event that a company or association is hosting that would benefit from an in person speech? I teach how to use storytelling to make a greater impact, how to build a greater team, and the habits of high performing individuals. If you have a connection, I'd be honored. My email address is don@donyaeger.com. That's don at donyaeger.com. If you email me, trust me, I'll reach back out to you and will even send you a book to say thanks. I appreciate you. What do most Fortune 500 executives have in common? They learned important lessons on the fields and courts of their high school and collegiate sports teams. This is true for both men and women. Ernst & Young found that a whopping 94% of women holding a C-suite position played sports. Their wins and losses shaped their habits and who they would become. Join me on my journey to sit with some of the brightest executives in the world as we discuss how sports shape their professional trajectory. In partnership with Chief Executive Magazine, the voice of America's CEO community. I'm your host, Don Yaeger, and this is Corporate Competitor Podcast. With me for today's episode is Mark Anderson. Mark is CEO of Alteryx, a company that simplifies advanced analytics so that clients can turn their data into breakthroughs. Prior to Alteryx, Mark served as president of Palo Alto Networks, where he and the team grew the company from pre-IPO in 2012 to become one of the largest security companies in the world. He grew up in Canada and was a standout hockey player and credits much of his discipline to the work ethic he cultivated on the ice. I'm excited to talk with him today about how to increase employee engagement and set a clear roadmap for our businesses.
You've always got to be sharpening the saw, always got to be developing, because new things are coming out every day. And if you're not on top of it, you're going to wake up one day and be replaced or be irrelevant.
Mark, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Don. Thank you so much for having me.
As I was studying your life and career, prepping for today, just some amazingly funny stories and some great lines. Now, I know born in Belfast, moved to Toronto at a young age, and I know hockey was your sport of choice. And on this podcast, we talk a lot with executives about how sports shaped them. Hockey literally reshaped you. I've even heard you joke on stages about the idea that your nose was broken 7 times.
Yes.
So completely reshaped because of sports.
Like Humpty Dumpty, exactly.
But I also heard you say in front of an audience, obviously, I was a better punch receiver than a punch giver in hockey.
For sure.
I'm hoping the business lesson I'm going to learn from you isn't about giving or receiving punches, but I do want to know, what's the big lesson hockey gave you?
Gosh, there's things I think about every day, just in terms of being a good team member, having real clarity of purpose of what you're doing relative to the overall mission. As a 12-year-old, I remember skating behind the net in a game where I just scored a go-ahead goal, and I was feeling fantastic about myself, and I was kind of virtually patting myself on the back as I was going around the back of the net. And then the next thing I remember, I wake up, flat on my back, on a hospital bed, bandages around my head. I remember feeling so good until I wasn't. The lesson there for me is you got to keep your head up at all times and don't get too comfortable about your accomplishments, because the world is moving very quickly, and sports like hockey and others move very quickly, and you've got to be ready for what's around the corner to be successful. And I think that's one of my, unfortunately, too many concussions that I think about from time to time.
Just that brief moment of virtually patting yourself in the back. I love that visual. And clearly another player had intentions not necessarily so good, and things change pretty quickly.
Exactly.
In this world, right? In the world that we're living in today, that ability, that challenge of constantly having to be on the ready, head up, there's some real goodness in that.
Oh, totally. Yeah, for sure. things like striving to get better all the time too. I mean, there's a whole litany of them, and I feel really lucky and blessed to have been on the receiving end of a lot of those lessons.
Obviously, that's not the most memorable moment of your ice hockey career, but give me a memorable moment.
Yeah, frankly, for me, the biggest moments were the successes that we celebrated as a team, whether it was winning a tournament or winning the regular season or winning the playoffs. I had very small anecdotal individual successes, but I always just sort of felt more elated at the team successes. And that really has helped me plot my way through looking for team successes at work. We're all going to get better from learning from the things we do well, but also the things that we don't do well.
In Canada, obviously, with hockey, it's a 12-month-a-year sport. Constantly, there's always the opportunity to be involved in leagues. Talk to me about the progression for you, as you said, the work to get better.
Yeah, for me, I was always a big kid, so I always had to kind of move a lot more weight around the rink. So, for me, it was, this notion of grit, having a real strong sense what the future looks like, and just having the will and the focus to execute a plan and go get better. In the summers, for example, working on my skating skills and being open to, getting lessons from a figure skater. And my team from the ages of, I think, 7 through 14, every summer we had to take power skating lessons. It was basically a variety of figure skaters teaching us mostly strength and flexibility posing kind of moves on the ice to strengthen parts of your anatomy that you don't necessarily work out in a gym. You think about a young male hockey player taking advice from a figure skater, well, they have a lot to teach when it comes to, balance and agility.
Right.
I was always looking for ways to try to get better and learn from others, to realize I couldn't do it all by myself. I had to be part of an orchestration system that was going to engage resources both within my team and outside of my team.
I love that. I worked with a number of NFL football players over the years, some of whom have gone to have ballet dancers and others kind of work with them on some of that core body skill and that ability to manage an oversized body, but do it with grace. So let's move that forward to your role as executive. You've spent a number of years now as an executive role. How are you learning from other industries, just as you're having to do there? Are there things you're taking from other industries that are helping you grow and be better even as a leader today?
Yeah, you bet. If I think of my journey, as a mid-level manager in the 90s at Cisco, I really cared about bringing John Chambers or Rick Justice out to visit my customers up in Seattle, because I wanted to learn from them in the off chance that I might be able to progress my career to that level. And I was sort of loaded up with questions that I'd think about, prioritize the night before, and take the advantage of the windshield time to be able to learn from an executive. And just having spent so much time in team sports growing up, I was also pretty open to other players on the field of battle sharing what's working for them. So I was always pretty intellectually curious. Once I realized that asking questions or asking for help is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness, I probably might have thought that way as a more immature man. Once I understood that and got that dynamic, I was never too shy to ask for help. And really, it's kind of formed my leadership in terms of being mindful that I'm one person, certainly not the smartest person in the room. I've got some good stage experience and a lot of competencies that go along with that. But my job ultimately is to orchestrate the output of hundreds or thousands of people. I'm just but one person in that whole orchestration. Hiring really good people to run the functional areas, a big and important part of that as well, and helping remove obstacles and getting them out of the way. I think I've learned a lot from previous generations of leaders or peers that were open to sharing.
I love that, especially at that window of time when you're getting a John Chambers in the passenger seat of the car or whatever it is, and taking advantage of that windshield time
Yeah,
to make that your own little private mentoring session.
totally.
You could have easily just said, let me talk to you about the client or but I assume you prepared for those opportunities.
I would slip them in appropriate ways. So it wasn't all about me. Gosh, I remember how gracious, in particular, John and many others were just in accommodating me on that. And it really made a good example later in life when I would get to know these people as friends, like people like John Chambers or Dan Warmanhover or others that have run large tech businesses. It's funny, they don't sit around and talk about how many zeros they have in their bank statement or how many homes they have. They talk about how many of their team members have gone on to become CEOs? Like that's the single biggest bragging factor is the outcomes that they've helped deliver for people that have worked on their teams before. And that was a great example.
It's their own version of a coaching tree.
Yeah.
So your father, first person in your family to go to college, graduated with an aeronautics degree.
Yep.
And you've made it clear in much of your statements and the things that I've read about how much you value education, hard work.
Right.
And it was said that those were integral in everything in your family life, and you watched it being lived out in front of you every day. How did some of that influence and what you witnessed as a kid shape those priorities for you?
It started out glad to get out of Belfast, Northern Ireland. It wasn't exactly a great time there in the 60s and the 70s. And if not for that education, my dad would have been like the vast majority of every other, male in their 20s or 30s in Northern Ireland being unemployed and left to their own devices. And we know how that plays out. From an early age, it was hammered into me just by example is that my dad had to bust his butt so that our family could be free and live in a country up in Canada where you could get a decent education and go chase your dreams. And he wanted something better for my generation, for me and my sister, and we want something better for our kids and so on and so forth. But it was a real daily reminder that things don't come easy. They're not handed to you. You have to be thoughtful and build a plan to go and execute against to deliver whatever outcome you're looking for. And early on for me, it was learning to get decent grades, to get into good schools. And subsequent to that, it was being ambitious and wanting to learn from the best in most areas and try to earn myself a good career path.
Yeah. In reading and learning more about hockey and its shaping of you, I know you credit that time on the rink for developing in you specifically discipline and work ethic. Those are the words that I've read you apply into hockey's influence. Can you share a time in your leadership journey post hockey where those two words, discipline and work ethic, shaped a choice or a decision or something that what you learned on the rink actually helped you as you were growing as a leader?
Yeah, gosh, there's, a whole bunch of things that sort of come to mind on this. I really appreciate this question in particular, Don. Just to be ambitious and to want to earn promotions, things don't happen by accident. And for me, I always felt a sense of camaraderie by making sure that I understood, what does success look like for every person that was in my orbit, right?
Right.
So customers, as a sales leader, what does success look like for them? And I really spent time on discovery to understand how they measured success. Sometimes it was a very personal and individual comment, but I needed to know that to help make sure that my business could fashion a solution around that. Same thing with me around getting promoted. Finding a company like an F5 or a Palo Alto Networks, or now current day an Alteryx that has a multi-year onslaught of massive total addressable market and a customer base that's willing to pay for the best solution out there. Those are the things that have to exist when you're trying to build a career of getting promoted several times. Because when the company's going to grow 20, 30% year over year for an extended period of time, there's more first, more second, more third level manager jobs that just naturally come open as the business scales. So for me, it was being very pragmatic around understanding the data, building a plan for success for myself, understanding what the success criteria was for peers and customers and others that I could engage in this initiative, and then just basically putting my head down and working through it. Couldn't say I was the fastest person doing it, but I could say that I would put my head down and work my way through it, and often, not stop until I was able to be successful. And those are kind of broad things, Don, but fundamental to kind of the example that my dad set for me.
This idea about what does success look like for everyone in my orbit?
Yeah.
You would build subtle ways of learning those, but you'd have to ask. I mean, you can't just assume what success looks like for others based on what it looks like for you. That's a great early in life skill to learn that most of us don't learn until way too late.
Yeah, certainly think you learn from different sports, especially team sports where you're constantly sort of analyzing the capabilities and the roles that your team members can play and making sure that if you're a captain or assistant captain, you get the right construct to go apply those specialties into a winning formula around plays out on the ice. I think I just learned it growing up working in retail, either in golf shops or bike shops and ski shops in the winter as well. And then this sort of happened without me even noticing it. But the more questions I asked customers walking into the stores that were looking to buy a pair of skis, the more ammo I could assimilate to justify them buying something that I knew was going to be right for them. Just doing that in retail environments for ages probably 14 through 21, that was a pretty good lesson of human nature and demonstrating earnestness and a good work ethic and integrity and character and some intellect, critical thinking abilities mixed along the way. But you were surfacing a lot of data about the customer's needs, then being able to do something positive for both people. I didn't get paid on a commission back then, but I cared about someone getting a good pair of skis and having a good experience, as opposed to the opposite. I really did learn to care about that.
A reputation you have professionally is you're also really good at doing this even with your own teammates. This ability of trying to draw out what success looks like. I understand that need to be able to go do it for a potential buyer. That's important. But it's also just as important within the four walls of our own organization to understand, what does success look like for you, but also understanding what drives them. How do you pull that from your teammates? What are some ways that you, and maybe some advice you'd give for us and other leaders on how you draw that kind of learning from your teammates?
Well, a couple of things. Like if you're a person leader, you're always responsible 100% of the time for curating that person and their extended team members. You're responsible for a role in that development journey of that person. And whether it's someone who's 7 levels below you that maybe you spend in an elevator ride from the 4th floor to the 1st floor, you want that interaction to be memorable and positive and empathetic to show that you're a real person. Or whether it's a direct report. For me, for the last more than 2 decades, I've engaged the services of a organizational psychologist to really help me teach my sort of philosophies on leadership and output and how to measure it and how to work together with the help of an organizational psychologist.
So you're still being coached.
Yeah, absolutely. This is like a coach that can really double my output as the head coach. But I know from having worked with this person for 25 years that he's going to get to the same results in a similar fashion as I would. But the fact by him doing it versus me, it's doubling my output with that person. Every interaction you're going to have is not going to be about your career. It's going to be maybe about the operating discipline of your environment, but just demonstrating consistent mindfulness and consistently devoting time to the plan. There is a plan for every one of my team members. They know what they're working on. They know what my role is in helping facilitate some of these introductions or capabilities, and we work on a regular basis.
I love it. One parallel you draw in hockey and in cybersecurity, we're going to talk about Alteryx in a bit, but that's where you guys really lock in and serve people extraordinarily well, is this notion that, quote, you're only as strong as your weakest link. I read a quote, you said, you can educate every employee, every single one, teach them about cyber hygiene, and then test them and test them again.
Yeah.
I think that's the best practice because you're only as strong as your weakest link. How do you work today to develop and educate people on what you call cyber hygiene?
Yeah, it's very strong. I think it holds true in analytics as well. In analytics, for far too long, companies have just tolerated the output of people just trying to do things manually. And I think, if anything, the pandemic has taught us that the digital transformation in areas like cybersecurity or data science and analytics, it's moving very quickly. And you've always got to be sharpening the saw, always got to be developing, because new things are coming out every day. And if you're not on top of it, you're going to wake up one day and be replaced or be irrelevant. In important areas like helping customers make better business decisions with all of the data that's swirling around their business. In my mind, that's a pretty darn important mission to work with people on. And education is just such a big part of that,
Right.
down to the individual employee level. And that's frankly the rationale behind the initiative that one of our founders, Libby Dwayne Adams, and I started earlier this year. It's called Sparked, with the ED at the end of Spark being capitalized, short for education. And we've rolled out, basically built a team of close to a dozen people already under Libby that are building data science and analytics curriculums and giving them to universities and saying, here, USC, UCLA, polytechnics in Asia, or universities, colleges in Europe as well. And then helping teach the teachers. So it's really like a turnkey data science and advanced analytics class. We donate the licenses so they can run the class on Alteryx, but it's not a commercial for Alteryx. It's really a certified, graded class that more and more universities are looking to companies like Alteryx to be able to provide to them. And just in a year, we've already affected close to 500,000 students around the world.
Wow.
This should be millions of people around the world over the next 3 to 5 years. And we want them to learn to upskill themselves. That really matters to me. The fact that we can impact in the next single digit number of years, millions of people's lives by taking their output and moving it from manual to automated. And that could be very rewarding for all of us.
Absolutely. Another place that I know you're passionate and you've shared a lot of buzz in this world of work life balance and integration, and you prioritize rest and recovery in the business world. I know in athletes, it's an important part of their entire, everybody thinks it's all about the working out. You go to any one of those places where they're training the best in class athletes, the rest and recovery portion of it is enormously important. In fact, it's a pillar.
Yeah.
With all that you have on your plate, how do you rest?
You do something long enough, you develop a rhythm, but it doesn't happen without a great support system. And I've got a great family and great longtime partner in my wife that has kind of helped me, remember what's really important. And it's those moments that I've gotten to spend with my family and my friends that really do matter. But listen, as I think about this for Alteryx employees, it's super important because especially in this day and age, when you wake up, you're talking to the same computer and screen that you talking to just before you go to bed. Might be a little different setup, might be in a different room, but you can work almost all the time, in this environment. And we've tried to really leave important breadcrumbs for people like paid days off that we call wellness days at Alteryx, respecting and celebrating and giving our people a day off for the most recent World Mental Health Day off that was proposed. And just, being mindful that, in this country, I think we can do a way better job helping avail our people to resources around mental illness. It's been a crazy couple of years, and we need to be mindful of the mental well-being of everybody that's in our solar system. That's customers and their families and partners, investors and employees and their families. The incidences are going way up. And so just trying to provide kind of a toolkit of resources that can be available to people. I've heard a couple of times in hockey, most recently, Carey Price, the goalie for the Montreal Canadiens, he's notified that he's going to take 30 days and get support from the NHL. And I think that's great. These people are under tremendous pressure as well. And just like all of us on the front line of cybersecurity or data and analytics, it's not for the faint of heart. And I think we got to be sure to look for signs when we're managing our people, just like we were looking for signs around productivity and output, looking for signs of fatigue and making sure they're taking advantage of the things that we're doing. Like we just fired up this employee use of this online app called Headspace.
I love Headspace.
Very cool.
So we touched very briefly on your time at Cisco. When I look at your work history, one transition that was fascinating to me was here you were working at Cisco. They're the big dog in the industry. And then suddenly you go to work for the scrappy competitor, Palo Alto. I love Palo Alto's fighting spirit, and I love the way that they come at Cisco.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that struggle with that transition.
Yeah.
How did working at the big dog prepare you?
In between Palo Alto and Cisco, I worked at a company called F5 Networks, and they were very small, a couple hundred million in size, and they were about 10 times bigger. And over that 8-year period, I really saw what product market fit and a really supportive CFO would allow me to build as a go-to-market leader at F5. I kept hiring good people and building a good process and facilitated some good output. And we had very successful outcomes for customers, shareholders, employees. Everybody did very well at F5. But I learned, the journeys that come along every phase or every stage of that growth, like going from early days of Palo Alto was a couple hundred million in sales. I got a real snapshot of what mid-level management looked like that in the 90s at Cisco. They were much, much bigger at the time. But my real salient experience was F5, just having gone through the 5 to 10x journey in a compressed period of time, it gives you a sense of a lot of potholes that you can avoid on the next time around. And for me, that was super helpful because I didn't really regret much at F5, other than not going faster. And the more I read about sports psychology and building and managing high performing teams in sports, there's such a parallel to business because you've got to have people that are, first of all, capable of doing it physically and mentally.
Yeah.
And you have to have teachers all along the way that are teaching them the next set of skills or competencies that are going to matter next year and the year after that. That takes a really supportive CFO. And certainly had a great one in Stephen Tomlinson at Palo Alto Networks. He's now at Confluent, just took Confluent public. And certainly have a great one here at Alteryx, and our current CFO, Kevin Rubin, is a great CFO.
I love it. So, lot of attention today to analytics in sports, analytics in business. Everyone's looking for measurables. I do have to tell you, looking for signs of fatigue, just as we're looking for signs of success. That was a deep comment I'm looking forward to thinking more about. But I know that one of your technology partnerships is with McLaren Formula One Racing. How are you helping them get faster?
That's a great topic for discussion. McLaren's a very good customer and partner. They use our software to help take data from over 25,000 different parts and components of an F1 car, for example, and hundreds of sensors in those parts to look at all kinds of data like wear and tear on the tires or wear and tear on all the different engine components. Often the devil is in the details in this regard as well. So being able to pull all that together from dozens of different data sets and automate the analysis and processing of information to help the design and engineering teams have to do too many manual things and manufacturing waste that can be overhead to any business. And so that's just a great example of driving the kind of efficiencies that you need from not only the business process, but right in through the manufacturing as well.
Wow. Yeah, I'm working on a book right now with a guy who was a previous podcast guest named Rick Hendrick. He owns a pretty successful NASCAR team.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And yes, as he has shared with me some of the work that they're doing, and just in the way so much of these data points and sensors are giving them feedback real time as they're flying around a track at 190 miles an hour.
Exactly.
I know there are more factors to success than just playing sports, but we've been operating under this assumption within this podcast that there is a truism that your leadership was enhanced by what you learned in sports.
Yeah.
Tell me, are you in agreement that you are a better leader because you have 7 broken noses?
The active point there is it's been properly repaired once. So that is the nose that allows me to cease being a mouth breather that I've been for most of my life. But especially around working well with others to achieve common dreams and goals that should matter to each individual, but should also matter to the collective of people that are going out there and trying to achieve something and being prepared to work hard for it, but to do so in an informed way with the right kind of plan and sourcing the right kind of data. That's a mouthful, but I really think the stories of Moneyball and analytics in every sport, I think last earnings call outlined of 4 or 5 different kinds of sports that we're currently supporting, including mentioning some teams beyond McLaren that use Alteryx to give them real-time decisions on simple things like fan engagement at the game.
Wow.
Or what services or partner services to market to which cohort of your consumers or customers, website, ticket holders, et cetera. The data, listen, is going to continue to be fragmented and going to continue to exist everywhere. And very quickly, the world is separating between the winners and the losers. The winners their businesses or governments will run better, will make better decisions and have happier constituents, employees. The losers are just going to fall farther and farther away. And so that's why I think this space has got multi-decade long legs. And in terms of the viable and growing large total addressable market that will be prosecutable. And equally importantly, customers want people to do more, not less, and build platforms because platforms typically win. That's what we're doing at Alteryx. I feel very clearly it's the opportunity professionally of my lifetime. And I mean that because I think there's thousands of people whose lives will be better when we do our jobs well. And that's what I care about more than anything else right now. outside of my family.
Wow. Given the experiences you've had in your lifetime, if this is the opportunity of your lifetime, that's pretty darn exciting.
Yeah.
When working with executives who have a history and an understanding of sports, many people, especially in the corporate world, refer to their organizations as teams. This is my team. The truth is, most of them are not teams. They're a collection of individuals, just happen to have the same logo on their shirt.
Yeah.
You know what it means to be part of a team. You also are building them.
Yeah.
What are the elements that can help take that group of individuals and help coalesce them, make them a team? What are some ways that you would counsel us or those who might be looking to build a great team to cross that bridge? What are the elements that you look for as you're trying to help somebody do that?
First and foremost, for any team or any project, is what do we think success is for all parties involved, not just for yourself? And in some cases, it can be quite as simple as working backwards from that future state and getting us to where we are now. That gives us a clear, definable plan.
Again, with the end in mind.
Yeah, exactly. Gosh, I was talking about the first page of that book, which I've referenced as my favorite book, at least leadership book, a long time ago. So then work backwards from that. Then have a communications framework, Don, that makes it very clear to everybody. First of all, what is success? Therefore, what do we have to do as a business functionally to achieve that success? I call those strategic imperatives, and they might be something basic like remove friction from anything that customers touch. And then a series of OKRs behind those strategic imperatives that gives people measurable workflows or work streams that you've got to do every quarter, that every quarter as you're engaging with your manager, you're discussing how the job is going, whether you're meeting or exceeding expectations. And you're tying it back to those OKRs that make it really simple. There's zero ambiguity about what anyone's doing relative to those strategic imperatives. And if we skate to where those strategic imperatives are, we're going to win.
Skate to where the strategic imperatives are.
That was the last little like mini hockey.
There was a very good mini hockey, good slide, good Wayne Gretzky. Go, go, go. So by the way, I've asked this question dozens of times. Never had anybody start with the end in mind, talking about success. I love that. Thank you.
Sure.
I love this idea of working backwards from that future state and then having zero ambiguity. Those are really powerful elements and absolutely would help create that collective will that you referenced earlier to go do something bigger than yourself. So last thing, we call the corporate competition. A few seconds, this or that questions.
Yeah, you bet.
All right. Salty or sweet?
Sweet, unfortunately.
Molson or Budweiser?
Definitely Molson.
Had to throw that in there. I figured that would be bad.
Yeah.
Text or call?
Text.
Ski or snowboard?
Started out skiing, then I went to snowboarding when my kids were learning, and now it's none of the above, unfortunately, as my time has gone away and I'm getting pretty old.
Seahawks or 49ers?
Seahawks, for sure.
I know. I'm with you.
I know.
I'm a big Pete Carroll, Russell Wilson guy, done some work out there, and I'm hoping that some of your data can help our team right now. We need you. Mark Anderson, I can't thank you enough. I hope you've gotten in as much or enjoyed as much of this time as I have. Means an awful lot that you've taken time today to be with us as a corporate competitor.
Well, thank you so much, Don. Really appreciate this forum. I'd like to put my thanks out to you as well, but also to every one of the thousands of people over the last 30 plus years that I've worked around that have worked together really hard to make me look good. I'm eternally grateful about that every single day and everything I do. And I sure hope there's thousands more out there that I can help as well.
Looking back at my notes, I love that Mark does not just assume what success looks like for others based on what it looks like for him. I'm going to add these questions to my team development discussions. What does success look like for you personally? And what does success look like for you in this role? I hope you'll consider adding those questions as well. If you could share one habit, one thing you've done consistently that allowed you to separate yourself from your competitors, what would it be? In my 30-year career, 2,500 of the greatest athletes, coaches, and leaders answered that question for me.
This is Don Yeager, who did that that article I was telling you about.
Don, Dave Sims with Coach K. How you doing?
Hey, Don. How you doing, my man? Great, sir. How are you?
What they gave to me is what I'm giving to you in my online course, Journey to Greatness. Through engaging storytelling and on-demand videos, you will learn the 16 habits that will jumpstart your personal growth. I will instruct you on how to apply these winning characteristics to your life through custom workbook exercises. We are slashing the price for our podcast listeners. Lifetime access to Journey to Greatness is normally $399, but for our podcast listeners, it will be $49 with the code podcast at checkout. Click the banner on corporatecompetitorpodcast.com to enroll. Thanks for listening to the show. I would be so grateful if you left us a rating and a review. We will be rolling out a new episode every Wednesday. To be the first to listen, subscribe to the podcast on our website, corporatecompetitorpodcast.com. Plus, as a thank you gift, you will receive a free chapter from one of my best-selling books on the habits of high-performing teams. Stay in touch by connecting with me on social media at Don Yeager, Y-A-E-G-E-R, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Until next week, I appreciate you.